They didn't just steal my papers, they stole the 3 years I spent starving so my dreams could breathe, leaving me to rot in the village while they flew on my wings. The village of Omunu was a place where dreams went to die in the dust, but Zola was different. For 1,000 nights, she had survived on a single meal a day, sewing clothes for the village women until her fingers bled, saving every kobo for the golden ticket, a nursing visit to Canada. Zola, my daughter, her father, Pojola, whispered one evening, his eyes misty. Your mother's spirit is smiling. You are the one to lift our name from the mud. He handed her the heavy green envelope that had arrived that morning. Zola clutched it to her chest, her heart drumming against her ribs like a trapped bird. But in the shadows of the corridor, 2 pairs of eyes watched. Mama Gogo's face was a mask of cold fury. Why should the house girl fly while her own daughter, busy, was stuck fetching water? That night, the house was silent, save for the chirping of crickets. Zola slept with the envelope under her mat, dreaming of snow and white uniforms. She didn't feel the floorboards creak. She didn't see the shadow hovering over her. She didn't feel the light touch as the envelope was slid out and replaced with a dummy. The next morning, the village was woken by a scream that shattered the dawn. Zola was on her knees, the dummy envelope torn open to reveal nothing but blank, mocking sheets of paper. My visa, it's gone. Zola shrieked, her voice breaking. Mama Gogo rushed in, faking a gasp of horror. Oh, Zola. I told you to be careful. I saw a strange man lingering near your window last night. He must have followed the scent of your pride. Behind her mother, Busy was already packed, a suitcase hidden under her bed, containing Zola's name, Zola's photo, and Zola's future. Just as Zola stood up to search the house, a taxi pulled up to the gate. Busy walked out with a suitcase, wearing Zola's best dress. Mama Gogo leaned into Zola's ear and whispered, the bird has flown, Zola. And you? You are just the dirt she left behind. Zola lunged for the taxi door, her fingers scraping against the glass as the engine roared to life. Through the window, Busy's face was no longer filled with the sisterly warmth Zola had foolishly trusted, it was a mask of cold, triumphant mockery. The taxi kicked up a cloud of red dust, choking Zola's lungs and blinding her eyes as the vehicle sped toward the city and the airport. Papa! Stop her! She has my life in that bag. Zola screamed, turning to her father. Pojola stood paralyzed, his hands shaking, his eyes darting to Mama Gogo. The fear in the man was a physical war. Mama Gogo stepped forward, crossing her arms over her chest, the gold on her wrist glinting in the morning sun like a warning. Stop who, Zola? Mama Gogo asked, her voice dangerously smooth. Busy is going to stay with her aunt in Lagos to find work. Are you so mad with grief that you want to stop your sister from helping herself? Your visa is gone because you were careless. God gives, and the careless lose. She is using my name. My fingerprints are on those papers. Zola roared, moving toward the house to find her phone. But Mama Gogo was faster. She blocked the doorway, her towering head wrap making her look like an ancient, vengeful deity. Your phone. You mean the one that fell in the water barrel this morning? Truly, the spirits are against you today, Zola. Zola realized then that this was not a sudden theft, it was an execution. Every exit had been blocked. Every tool of rescue had been destroyed. For 3 days, Zola was kept like a prisoner in her own home, Mama Gogo claiming to the neighbors that Zola had lost her mind due to the trauma of the robbery. By the time Zola managed to escape the compound and trek the miles to the local travel office, the official looked at her with pity. The flight left 48 hours ago, my dear, the woman said, checking the logs. The passenger, Zola Jola, has already cleared immigration in Toronto. There is nothing we can do. Zola walked out into the heat of the afternoon. She had no money, no identity, and no home to return to. The silence of the street felt like a grave. Zola reached the edge of the village, intending to never look back, when a black car with tinted windows, the kind never seen in Omunu, silently pulled up beside her. The window rolled down just an inch, revealing a pair of sharp, intelligent eyes and a voice that sounded like smooth gravel. "You look like a woman who has had her soul stolen. Would you like to know how to steal it back?" Zola froze. The air around the sleek, charcoal-black vehicle felt colder, smelling of expensive leather and old secrets. The man in the back seat was draped in a shadow so thick he seemed part of the car itself. He was Sir Silas, a man whose name was whispered in the city as the fixer, a billionaire who traded in information and broken lives. "I don't have money for your games," Zola rasped, her throat dry from the red dust of the road. "I don't want your money, child," Sir Silas replied, his voice a low, rhythmic rumble. "I want your hunger. A woman who has lost everything is the most dangerous weapon on earth. I watched you at the travel office. You didn't beg. You didn't faint. You just calculated." He pushed a heavy, silver-embossed card through the sliver in the window. "I lost a daughter who had your eyes. She was soft, and the world ate her. If you want to remain soft, keep walking into the forest. If you want to become the fire that burns the hands that robbed you, come to the city." The window rolled up, and the car sped off, leaving Zola standing in the deepening purple twilight. She looked back at the village, the house where her father hid in silence and where Mama Gogo was likely pouring celebratory palm wine. She looked at the silver card. 2 days later, Zola arrived at the gates of a sprawling estate in the city. She was no longer crying. The girl who sold for pennies was dead. In her place was a woman with a heart of flint. For the next 2 years, Zola did not return to the village. Under Silas's brutal tutelage, she didn't just learn to sew, she learned the business of presence. She studied fabrics that cost more than her father's house, learned the etiquette of the elite, and how to read a person's weakness by the way they tied their shoes. But every night, before she slept, she looked at a smuggled photo of Busy in Canada. Busy, wearing Zola's name like a stolen coat, living a life of luxury while Zola scrubbed the floors of Silas's library to pay for her lessons. "The time is coming," Silas told her one morning, looking at a newspaper. "A prestigious fashion gala is being held in Toronto. The guest list includes the young nursing sensation and philanthropist, Zola Jola." Zola's grip tightened on the silk she was cutting. The theft was now a brand. Busy wasn't just living her life, she was profiting from her identity. Zola boarded the plane, her heart a cold engine. She arrived in Toronto under her new identity, but as she walked through the galley gates, she saw a familiar figure at the entrance. It wasn't Busy. It was her father, Jola, looking thin and broken, holding a sign that read, "Searching for my daughter, Zola Jola." The sight of her father hit Zola like a physical blow to the chest. He looked like a shadow of the man who had once handed her that fateful envelope. His clothes were tattered, his eyes clouded with cataracts, and he stood trembling in the freezing Canadian wind, a pathetic figure ignored by the glittering elite flowing into the hall. "Zola. Is that my Zola?" he whimpered as she walked past, his voice barely audible over the hum of luxury cars. He didn't recognize her. How could he? She was draped in a structured charcoal silk cape, her hair swept up in an architectural crown, her face a masterpiece of cold, expensive makeup. "Move along, old man," a security guard barked, shoving Jola back. Zola's hand twitched. She wanted to scream, to catch him before he fell, to demand to know why he was here. But she felt Silas's voice echoing in her head, "Empathy is the rust that eats the blade." If she revealed herself now, the trap she had spent years building would snap shut on her own neck. She watched from the shadows of the grand foyer as Busy, now known to the world as the Saint of Toronto, emerged from a limousine. Busy was glowing, draped in white lace that looked suspiciously like the pattern Zola had designed back in the village. Beside her walked Mama Gogo, looking like a queen mother in emerald green, her neck dripping with diamonds bought with a stolen life. When they saw the old man at the gate, Mama Gogo didn't flinch. She leaned toward a security detail and whispered. Minutes later, the police arrived to haul Zola away for harassment. "He's just a crazy beggar from back home," Busy laughed to a reporter, her voice dripping with fake pity. "My father died years ago. This man is just trying to feast on my success." Zola watched through the glass, her nails digging into her palms until she drew blood. They hadn't just stolen her life, they had discarded the man who enabled their climb. The fire in her heart turned from red to a blinding, surgical white. Zola entered the main ballroom and approached the VIP table where Busy and Mama Gogo sat. She leaned down and whispered into Mama Gogo's ear in the specific, melodic dialect of their village, "The harvest is over, Mama Gogo. Now, we count the seeds." Mama Gogo's glass of champagne shattered on the floor. Mama Gogo's face turned the color of ash. She stared up at the woman in gold, her breath hitching in a throat that suddenly felt too tight. The dialect was unmistakable. It was the ancient, rhythmic tongue of Omunu, a language Busy had spent years trying to scrub from her polished Canadian persona. Who are you?" Mama Gogo stammered, her hands trembling so violently that the shards of her broken glass bit into her palms. Zola didn't blink. She maintained a sharp, predatory smile, her eyes locked onto Busy, who was frozen with a fork halfway to her mouth. "I am the ghost of the girl you buried in the red dust," Zola whispered, leaning closer so the scent of her expensive perfume mixed with the phantom smell of the village wood smoke filled Mama Gogo's senses. "But ghosts don't stay in the dirt when there is a debt to collect." Before Mama Gogo could scream, Zola straightened up and switched to a flawless, upper-class British accent. "I am Zola Valentine, the primary investor for tonight's gala. I believe there has been a mistake with your seating. My records show this table is reserved for legitimate guests." The surrounding elite began to whisper. Busy, panicking, tried to stand. "This is an outrage. Do you know who I am? I am Zola Jola. I am the face of this foundation. Are you?" Zola asked, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. She signaled to a waiter, who began handing out elegant, gold-bordered pamphlets to the guest. Inside was not the gala program, but a side-by-side comparison of Busy's original nursing designs and the sketches Zola had made 5 years ago in the village, complete with the hidden Z watermark woven into the fabric patterns. Mama Gogo lunged for a pamphlet, her eyes wide with terror. She realized then that they weren't just being insulted, they were being dismantled in front of the world. But the real blow came when Silas appeared behind Zola, holding a phone. "The police have released the beggar at the gate," Silas announced loudly. "And he has a very interesting story about a stolen passport and 2 women who left him to die in the cold." Zola took a step forward, his voice cracking the silence of the room. "That woman is not Zola Jola," he pointed at Busy. "She is a thief who stole my daughter's name. And that woman," he pointed at Mama Gogo, "is the one who gave her the knife to do it." As the security guards moved in, Busy grabbed a steak knife from the table, her eyes wild with madness. The ballroom descended into a chaotic symphony of gas and clinking silverware. Busy stood trembling, the steak knife in her hand glinting under the crystal chandeliers. Her Saint of Toronto mask had melted away, revealing the jagged, desperate girl from the village who had never learned to build, only to take. "Stay back!" Busy shrieked, her voice cracking as she swung the blade toward the approaching guards. "I earned this. I lived the lie until it became the truth. You can't take it back now." Mama Gogo sat frozen, her emerald lace soaked in spilled champagne and her own blood. She looked at her daughter, the daughter she had saved by ruining another, and for the first time, she saw the monster she had created. Busy wasn't a success, she was a hollow shell, terrified and cornered. Zola stepped forward, bypassing the guards. She didn't look afraid, she looked disappointed. The gold of her cape swirled around her like a protective aura. "Put the knife down, Busy," Zola said, her voice dropping to a hauntingly calm whisper. You already cut your own throat the moment you stepped onto that plane. Every luxury you touched was poisoned because it didn't belong to you. You were supposed to be nothing. Busy screamed, tears smearing her expensive mascara. You were supposed to die in Omunu. I did die, Zola replied, taking another step. The girl who loved you like a sister is gone. But the woman standing here. She owns the bank that holds your debts. She owns the foundation you represent. I didn't just come for my name, Busy. I came for everything. Outside, the wail of sirens grew louder. Sir Silas stood by the doors, his arms crossed, watching the scene with the cold satisfaction of an architect watching a faulty building finally collapse. He nodded to the lead detective entering the room. As the detective reached for Busy, she didn't surrender. Instead, she turned the knife toward her own throat, her eyes fixed on Mama Gogo. If I can't have your life, Zola, then you have to live with my blood on your hands forever, she screamed. But just as she moved her arm, a voice boomed from the back of the hall, a voice that made even Zola's heart stop. Stop. She isn't the only one who stole that name. The ballroom plunged into a second, deeper silence. Emerging from the shadows near the service entrance was a man no one expected to see, the travel agent from Sapele Road, the one who had disappeared shortly after Zola's visa was stolen. He looked haunted, clutching a weathered leather briefcase as if it were a shield. I took the bribe, the man confessed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Mama Gogo didn't just steal the envelope. She paid me to scrub the digital records, to swap the biometric data in the system so the embassy would see Busy's face but Zola's name. I've lived in guilt for 5 years, hiding in the shadows of this city, watching them thrive on a lie. Busy's hand froze. The knife tip was mere millimeters from her skin, but the weight of this final truth seemed to sap the strength from her bones. The blood on Zola's hands, threat vanished. There was no room for melodrama when the cold, hard machinery of a criminal conspiracy was being laid bare. Zola didn't look at the agent. She looked at Mama Gogo. You didn't just want a future for your daughter, Zola said, her voice heavy with the realization of the depth of the betrayal. You wanted to erase me from existence. You wanted to make sure that even if I cried for help, the world would see a ghost. The police moved in swiftly. The knife clattered to the marble floor, a hollow, tinny sound. Busy was led away in handcuffs, her white lace gown dragging in the spilled filth of the evening. Mama Gogo was escorted out next, her head down, the towering galley finally falling completely to the floor, trampled by the boots of the officers. Zola turned to her father. Pajola was weeping, but they were no longer the tears of a broken man, they were the tears of a father who had finally found his way home. Zola didn't say a word. She simply opened her golden cape and folded him into it. The visa was delayed, Papa, she whispered into his ear as the cameras flashed, capturing the true scent of Toronto. But God's plan was never stolen. Thank you for following the journey of Zola Jola.